Hello, listeners. If you haven't liked, subscribed, or followed the Sounds of Living podcast accounts, you could find us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Patreon at Sounds of Living Podcast. Any donation would be greatly appreciated to help support my journey of taking Sounds of Living around the United States. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to Sounds of Living. I'm your host today, Alex Kellerman, and I'm sitting here with Leigh Orlando-Ward. Leigh, say what's up.
Howdy. What is up?
How's it going, man?
Oh, very good. Having a great weekend. I'm glad it's a holiday weekend for me.
That's awesome. Have you ever been on a podcast before?
I have not. Never. I did do radio, sort of. In college, I did a couple of radio shows that I really enjoyed hosting, and that was really fun. So that was my closest thing. But, little college radio station. We could track our listeners. We got maybe 30 listeners at peak, during our shows. So that was that. But yeah, no podcasting.
Well, I'm happy that you are here today. Why don't you tell us about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Leigh, and I'm 30, if that is important, and recently got a great new job I'm very excited about, doing some program management and sustainability, trying to develop my career in sustainability, got a master's degree recently, which is pretty kind of defining for my life at this moment. But in general, I've, explored all sorts of different stuff for work. I started out in environmental science, environmental restoration, and that really stemmed from my love for the outdoors. Post-college, I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Let's see what is out there. Found a fun job, and that just kind of rolled me into doing environmental work, and then that rolled into sustainability. But that all stemmed from me wanting to be outside and enjoy the outdoors, and that's definitely a huge part of my life. I love rock climbing. I've been recently getting back into it. Took a hiatus for a year. That was a bummer, but back into it. Really just find my own personal peace and centeredness outside. And I really not only working in nature but understanding it. I love just watching nature documentaries, gaining knowledge on the outdoor world and animals and all that jazz, and maybe sometimes I wish I lived in more natural circumstances, but one day. Man, I do a ton of different hobbies, and none of them very well. I feel I extend myself out to all sorts of different stuff. I've been playing drums on and off for about 20 years now, which is crazy. Wow. Since I was 8 years old, so over 20 years, I guess. Last year or so I haven't played, actually, but I still would call myself a drummer because I try to stay in touch with the ideas of drumming and, always checking in on the drumming world and thinking and talking about my favorite drummers and stuff like that. So I'm in and out of that world, but music is also just a huge thing for me. I absolutely love music. I've always loved music. My mom is a huge musician. My dad is definitely a musician. I think he thinks he's better than he is. I mean, he's great. He's good on the guitar. He's got a nice voice. But my mom is just a fantastic singer. She's absolutely wonderful at it. My aunt and uncle are both jazz musicians on my mom's side. That whole aspect of my family has just been pretty pivotal to me growing up. So yeah, music and listening to music and playing music and talking about music has definitely been a huge thing for me in my life. And other than that, I love cars. I love technology and tinkering with things. I love working with my hands and things like that. So I do way too many things, like I said, and I never really fully dedicate myself to all of them or any of them because I'm so torn between them. But I kind of like that. I like the idea of dabbling in all sorts of different stuff, trying new things. And so that's kind of my aim for entertaining myself.
Well, that's cool. I think it's important that music has been that consistent thing since you were a child. It's nice that you were able to grow up with parents that were talented musicians, it sounds like, right?
Yeah, no, they definitely were really talented. The fact that my aunt and uncle have made it as jazz musicians, I mean, they're not, hugely successful or everything, but they've done that as a career their whole lives, and that's a huge challenge and success on its own, so.
For sure.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, why don't you tell me about Tool's album Undertow? How did that affect your life?
At the time when I was younger listening to them, they felt alternative and not in line with the mainstream. I feel now they've become so mainstream that they kind of don't necessarily typify the same kind of ideas colloquially, like the way they're treated culturally, I think is a little bit different than I saw them growing up. But for me, I mean, they were real artists through and through. So much of Maynard, the lead singer, and his whole mentality about expressing himself through art and how he looked at emotional expression and how he looked at emotional development and our rejection of society and the things that we didn't like in society and how that affected us. I think that really resonated a chord with me as a angsty preteen, as we all kind of reach out like at that time I was listening to things like Linkin Park and Disturbed and all sorts of very angsty music, you know. Maybe that's part of the time period, but also maybe it's like just part of the emotional outlets I was looking for. So Undertow, it's a great album. Definitely not listed by most Tool fans, I would say, as like the best Tool album. And I don't even know if I'd say it is. But for me at that time period, there was really just something about like the raw emotion and the exhibition of, I don't want to say like aggression, but the exhibition of a performance of aggression. So like you're getting out this frustration, but it's like tempered by like this constant pullback for a desire for beauty and contemplation. And that's what's cool about Tool to me, is that like a lot of metal and like angry, intense music has that aggression, has that over the top energy. But Tool is always really good about tempering themselves and walking that backwards and then trying their best to be pretty eloquent, even if it can be pretty cheesy and over the top at times.
Was there a specific song that got you into Tool in the first place?
Their first songs that were like on the radio for them all the time, definitely Sober, you know, it's still on the radio all the time.
Is it on that album?
It is on that album, yeah. Another one, Prison Sex, which is a fucking dark song. Honestly, it's like crazy that like a 13-year-old was digging into those kind of subjects, and like I don't think I was overly exposing myself to something I wasn't ready for. I think I actually really understood it, and it's kind of weird to me that like vibed so well with me when I was 13. It's a dark song. He's kind of, Maynard and Tool in general really go for that idea of beauty and anger, and I think that is something that helped me not actually be an angry person. I don't think listening to that music makes me angry. I think it allows me to not be angry. If that makes sense.
For sure.
Yeah.
What genre would you say Tool's under?
I would say hard rock, progressive rock. I think some people say they go into metal. I'm not really sure. I'd say hard rock, progressive rock.
And they were able to express their emotions in a way that you were able to relate to them?
I mean, yeah, Maynard, his singing really was what centered me, I think, at the time. And then as I grew as a drummer, Danny Carey is one of just the most phenomenal drummers ever. And the artistry that always backed everything, they're all absolute phenoms, and they're known for their long, drawn-out fucking like 10-minute sections of just like super slow shit. And I loved that stuff. It wasn't like I was ever skipping it. I was like really wrapped up in it. And I think that's probably pretty defining of a lot of progressive rock in general. And I think that's why I like a lot of progressive rock. And the later album, From Black Crown Initiate, is kind of an advancement of that sort of idea.
And have you seen them live?
Tool, yeah, I saw once. I've been meaning to see them again. They're coming to Phoenix soon. It's like $150 a ticket. I'm not so sure. I think I'm going to do it, but I'm like, man, that's hard. But I did see them once before. They've become a huge arena band at this point, but that's okay. It's a great time. They really wrap you up in it.
And you've been listening to Tool. How old were you? I know you said you were preteen, but do you remember the exact age?
Probably 12. 11 or 12.
They've been there this whole time.
Yeah, I'd say so. I haven't gone back to them in like probably 6 or 8 months right now. Like I go through phases, I think, with a band like that. When you're just like consuming an album over and over again for a few months, it like starts to get repetitive.
For sure. So you like to explore other artists so that you don't get tired of the ones that you love initially.
Yeah, I have made myself tired on artists before, and so I try to avoid that.
So why don't you tell me about your next pivotal album that you had, Balmorhea, the Stanger album?
Yeah.
Are they a part of that same realm of alternative rock and like punk?
They're more relaxed. I'll definitely caveat my selections by saying they all lie in like the rock, hard rock, metal kind of area, but I was really close to picking a couple of hip-hop albums for this selection. I was really close to picking a couple of folk albums, but I think I just kept thinking back. If I were to look at my Spotify data, I probably could have. That would have been fun. But what have I listened to the most? It's consistently hard rock and metal. So that's just like my ultimate love in music, but I like all sorts of things. And Balmorhea really fits a lot of different gaps. I'd say like post-rock in a way, ambient sometimes. I don't think they really do any electronic instrumentation, but I think everything they do is some sort of acoustic. Well, I mean, you know, electric guitars and things like that. But
so when did they show up?
Sophomore year of college. I was sitting and trying to study and just being really frustrated and not being able to think straight, and like I just never had this moment of clarity. But this song that I'd never heard popped on.
What was the name of that song?
I think it's Jubi off of that album, Jubi. But there's a few ones on that album that really get me. There's just something about it that not only like relaxes me, but like brings this like clarity, this like centeredness that I had never felt in music before. And since then I've started to seek out like things that like almost are meditative, but in a way also they bring a light to what you're looking at. They don't just relax me, they kind of embellish and help what I'm thinking.
Is it the sound that is created, or is it more of what they discuss in the songs? Like I know that you had talked about how how Tool's album was kind of a combination of everything because of the way they expressed their emotions, but what they also talked about and how they portrayed their life in general. That was what made it so that you were able to relate to it. Was it a similar sort of vibe with Balmorhea, or would you say that it was more you were just into the music?
Yeah, no, with Balmorhea, they're almost entirely instrumental. So they're like really atmospheric at times. I mean, like, you know, I think their instrumentation constantly changes, but they're entirely instrumental. Maybe there's a few, actually, no, there's a few songs with some backing, like, ooh, kind of things and stuff like that. There's overall really no words whatsoever. So I think it's all about the sounds for them. It's really all about the sounds for them.
I mean, I don't know Balmorhea. I didn't realize that you would pick a band that didn't have any vocals in it. Or if they are vocals, it's not specific words, right?
Yeah. And a lot of the music I listen to is entirely instrumental. I love lo-fi hip-hop beats and things like that. I also love, I mean, there was a huge portion of my life where all I listened to was like post-rock, like Explosions in the Sky, Mogwai, Godspeed You Black Emperor, like so many different things that were just entirely instrumental, really drawn out and long. But these days, you know, I love things like Animals as Leaders, all sorts of like complex instrumental music, and that kind of speaks to my musician brain. I think I'm seeking out patterns a lot in music as a drummer and just as a musician, and I'm like really often looking for technicality in music. Like that really feeds my brain and feeds what I'm looking for. And so instrumental music, it's funny, like I was saying with Tool, like Maynard is so much of that. Even though I do love Danny Carey, I love Adam Jones and Justin Chancellor, those are the other two guys in Tool. Almost forgot their names, but they're all great, fantastic. But there's the vocals in Tool really drive those emotional feelings for me. That's definitely not the only music experience that I really like. So yeah, I think Balmorhea I chose specifically partially because they are instrumental. That's probably part of the centeredness that I'm looking for, you know, that lack of human ego, lack of like connection to human voice. It feels more ethereal and like just the sounds on their own are what's impacting you.
What is the thought process that you have when you're listening to the music? Are you thinking about what's going on in your life, or are you trying to pay attention to what's being played?
That's a good way to say it. It's like why I picked Balmorhea is they allow me to pay more attention to what is being played. And artists like them, you know, they fit into a category, I think, of a few different artists. But something like Tool is really going after what I'm thinking about in that moment. You know, I'm like trying to process an emotion, whereas listening to Balmorhea is letting me disassociate in a way. That somehow brings me like mental acuity. You know, it really helps me think.
So you would say Balmorhea would be like you're in the zone of what's being played and you're just trying to focus on how the instruments make you feel, but you're not focusing on anything outside of that because you don't know what they mean other than this is what it is. I enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it does bring up emotions too, but those don't necessarily have to be there. I think that the lyrics in themselves are implying certain emotions. You get that freedom without those lyrics is that you can like, you know, a guitar tone is certainly implying emotions on its own, but there's more freedom to how you interpret it and how it hits you. And lyrics is more specific.
Interesting. To go back to Undertow, were there any like specific moments that were difficult in your life that album helped you get through?
Yeah, definitely. Parents' divorce was probably the biggest one. I mean, like, if I ever wanted to scream, listening to someone do it for me helped out in a way, you know? More so, I think, with Undertow and Tool, like, they really try to poetically explore these ideas. So, like, they allow that raw emotion to exist there, but it's not just, like, a punk song that just is, like, entirely raw emotions. They explore the more introspective side of those emotions while also allowing for an outlet to release the more intense raw emotion.
So Stanger was kind of the opposite end of Tool's Undertow.
Yeah, definitely. It kind of like provided a different thing that I'd never really thought about music being able to provide. Even like relaxing songs, like for instance, Fleet Foxes is one of my favorite relaxing folky kind of things. Even still in that kind of setting, I let myself get over emotional. You know, I went to go see Fleet Foxes and I'm like belting out every song. And recognizing how to like sit back and just absorb something, learning that ability and discovering that ability was really useful and pivotal. And I find myself to be a very stressed out, anxious person a lot of the time. So being able to step back outside of yourself is that same sort of thing. So it's like, are you trapped inside those mentalities in that moment and unable to escape them? Or are you able to step back and see yourself for what you are from the outside? And so I guess like Tool and Undertow would be helping me with the first one, and Balmorhea would be helping me with the second one.
It's crazy how you've gone through, I mean, we haven't even hit your third pivotal point yet, but it seems like it is all coming at the right times in your life. When you had Undertow, it was just understanding of what's being said, what you're thinking, what's going on around you, being able to express your emotions of anger in a healthy manner. But then sitting back and listening to Stanger by Balmorhea, it had the opposite effect. It was more of you're in the music. You're listening more than speaking.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to put it. Like, some music can speak for you, and some music you should listen to.
Wow, that's really cool. I never thought of it that way.
Thank you for putting that into words. That's great. Yeah, I don't know if I'd had it like fully formed that yet together.
What I've noticed, and this is just like with every person that I've recorded with, people's moments with the music they listen to, they all interconnect with whatever pattern they want to form. I mean, it seems like you will listen to something as much as you possibly can to try to understand it fully. It sounds like you had a clear idea of what it was. You moved on to the next stage, and that was the other end of the spectrum. Now you're at this most recent stage with Black Crown Initiate with the album Selves We Cannot Forgive. So how did you get to that point?
In general, I mean, I've gone back and forth with that idea of like anger and frustration, and sometimes, you know, there are long periods in my life where I'm like, I don't want to embellish or you know, tap into those emotions at all, and then there's other times in my life where I'm like, you know, that's all I'm feeling, so I kind of want to just you know, I gotta work through it in some way or other. And, you know, really recently I just was really struggling at work and just very, very frustrated with a lot of things, and not feeling like I had a ton of people to talk to about it, not feeling like I had a lot of outlets in general. And then that culminated in me having to like quit really suddenly, and like almost being fired, and just all sorts of crazy stuff. And it was just a really hectic and really frustrating time. And so throughout that, I let work really define me, and sometimes I need to rein that in and work on that, but it kind of consumed my life. And so like sometimes I needed something like Balmorhea to set me back, and then other times it just wasn't enough, and I just felt like I needed to walk through those emotions. So I really like really extreme metal for that, and this is like probably some of the most extreme metal I've really like felt like deep emotions about before. But Black Crown Initiate is just really able to walk through a ebb and flow of like extreme intensity, and then like suddenly walk it back in a similar way to that Tool does, to like a recognition of beauty, elegance, a recognition of like reverence for the world, reverence for the feelings that you're having. Like, you know, even like if you're diving into dark feelings, there's still all sorts of beauty in that darkness. I kind of equate it to like fantasy shows, you know. To me, like that really extreme metal is like watching like really intense fantasy show or something like that. It's like engaging into ideas that are so over embellished that they elucidate the things that you're feeling, and they kind of make clear like what are the real main parts of these things that I'm feeling that I need to work through. This album itself is just really beautiful ebb and flow, give and take of just some really intense anger, followed then by like a soft sadness and like catharsis, really. I feel like I come off as a pretty quiet, and not quiet, but, you know, relaxed and chill guy. But like, I think that's because I'm able to get these emotions out by listening to some pretty extreme music sometimes.
So would you say that Black Crown Initiate, they're able to incorporate both styles of being soft, and you're able to listen and try to like understand what the music is saying, but you're also able to go and say how you're feeling through the words of what they're talking about? So it's a combination of both moments, but coming into your life now.
You're totally right. And Tool kind of does this too, but there's something about progressive metal, and I don't want to sound like a nerd for this like specific genre, but like there's something about its exploration of extreme technicality and extreme musicality that allows them to explore so many different ideas within a single song. I mean, sometimes the songs are pretty long, but I think that is a really important point of the genre, is that it does do multiple things. It doesn't just hit you over the head with a singular idea. I think part of their stylistic point is to have these really soft moments that are broken by sudden intensity. That is, I think, has a lot of metaphor for the ways that we experience our world and how we come in and out of our own kind of consciousness. That's something I'm really just interested in looking for in music, is a music that can satisfy several different needs. So yeah, maybe I am looking for a listening experience that both allows me to enliven my emotions and temper them at the same time. Tool would be the most of the first one, and Balmorhea would be the most of the second one.
You know what that gets me thinking about is, in life, we have moments where we feel content, and then there are other times where we feel like everything and everyone is against us. And I feel like music that is able to, I guess, express both of those feelings, because it's never consistent. The only thing that's consistent is change. So being able to go from, you know, the extreme happiness to the extreme anger to the extreme, it doesn't even have to be extreme, but it's this flow that we all have to go through no matter what stage we're at.
Yeah.
You know, and it's the older we get, the better we understand it. And it sounds like you're at a point where you're like, okay, I've had this one part of my life where I was able to express myself, this other part of my life where I had to listen, and now you want to do both because you have an understanding of both of them. And this album, Selves We Cannot Forgive, perfectly expresses all of those emotions at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially the title song on it, that is the same as the album title. It really starts out very soft and has just a lot of very soft, beautiful guitar parts, and then rolls really slowly into some like nice droning and more intense. It's really got that give and take that I'm talking about.
I think it's really admirable that you are so in touch with your emotions, because I think most people, it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from, that is difficult to be able to identify how you're feeling and why you're feeling a certain way. So it's awesome that you've been able to figure that out through the music you listen to.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad to hear that you think that you admire it, because I often feel like my overindulgence of thinking about my emotions makes me distracted and kind of takes me away from the moment sometimes. So I'm glad that it can be useful every now and then.
I feel like you gotta just embrace everything about you. You can't force anything. You know,
Yeah.
Like if you want to be a certain way and you're not, you can't change what you're meant to do, what you're meant to feel.
Yeah.
Just embracing all of that is so important in order to figure out how to be the best version of you, because other people are not able to do that as well. And like we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and I would say that it's a strength that you're able to feel so much.
Oh, well, thanks, man. Appreciate that. I mean, yeah, I appreciate that my parents really spent a whole heck of a lot of time just talking to me about how they feel and I feel, and I wish we would all do it more too. I think a podcast like this hopefully assists people in their ability to just kind of walk through different ideas, but I also think that I am not very good at it a lot of times, so I appreciate your guidance on this as well. I think you've already clarified a few of my own thoughts, and that's what's nice about talking them out with people, is like sometimes it's hard to like put your own string of thoughts together until someone else has heard it and kind of summarized it in a succinct way for you, and that is really helpful in a lot of ways.
Well, I'm glad to help, and this is about you, so being able to understand yourself better, especially through things that you enjoy, feels pretty fulfilling.
It's all about me? Oh my gosh. I feel so honored.
Well, Leigh, you have a chance to say whatever you think is important to the world. Why don't you say what's on your mind?
Yeah. If I'm going to dig deep and do some soul searching, I'd say that I get really frustrated by the lack of intentionality in the world around me. And I feel like a lot of people today are really disengaging, and it really bothers me. And so, one, I love to see podcasts like this being made where you're doing the opposite. You're intentionally engaging. And two, I'd really just, after thinking about these things, I'd really encourage more people to, whatever music you're listening to, whatever endeavor you enjoy, just really dive into it and dig into it. Don't just let it float by. We're constantly pushed by society to disengage. I mean, all the time. Advertising, media, and media can be a thing that you love. That doesn't mean you have to avoid watching TV. You have to avoid watching movies. You can love that. But point being is, how do you actualize yourself in those moments? How are you navigating those spaces? And hopefully we're all doing it more intentionally. I think we could all have a lot more fun and be happier if we dive into things like this. So this is a kind of endeavor that I would like to do just more in my own time. And, I'd like to find more friends like you who can want to have these conversations. And so great stuff, man. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Leigh, for sharing your perspective. And I think it's important to think about everything you're doing and why. So the whole living intentionally is a perfect way of putting it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for saying that. I think people will really relate to that statement.
Cool. I'm glad. I hope so. We'll see.
Well, to wherever you are, I wish you happiness and good health, and I will see you next episode.